A warm welcome to all my fellow panelists and appreciate you taking out time. Also, a warm welcome to the delegates who are part of this webinar or this session. Again, just in terms of the context, and before I get into the context, maybe if I could request each of the panelists to quickly introduce themselves before we get into the meat. Starting with probably Dr. Vishal, if I could request you to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Myself, I am Dr. Vishal Chaudhary. I am presently working as a Deputy Industrial Advisor in Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals. I am looking after all the technical matters and aspects related to chemicals and chemical industry. So I am basically a doctorate in chemistry, and I am having an experience of more than 20 years of working in private sector. Then I went to public. I started my journey with Remdexi. Then I went to Jubilant in Centis Pharma. Then I joined HIL, which is public sector in insecticides manufacturing of agrochemicals. And since 2019, I'm working with the central government, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers. So that's all. I'm also having 5 research publications to my credit. And my basic research was into the surfactant action on pesticide and pharmaceutical formulations. So that's all from introduction from my side. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Vishal. Over to Dr. Ravi from Syngenta. I know now we have 2 Dr. Ravis. So,
Thank you, Avinash, and good morning to all of you. I'm really excited to be part of this panel discussion. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Syngenta India, and I have close to about 30 years of experience in various sectors, including agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Over to Dr. Ravi from FMC.
Yes, hi. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to all the fellow panelists as well. I am Dr. Ravi Annavarapu. I'm the President of Business for FMC India. I'm a PhD in Chemical Engineering. I thought since we are sharing our doctorates, I put mine as well. But nice to see that. And I've been in the field of agriculture for about 5 years. And before this, I've been in many different industries related to chemicals, specialty chemicals, food, nutrition, pharmaceuticals, etc. So good to be here.
Welcome, Dr. Ravi. Mr. Chari, over to you.
Yeah, good morning. This is Sunil Chari. I co-founded Rosari Biotech Limited, which is now a 2,000 crore company. In 1997, I passed out from VJTI and did my MBA from Wellinger in Mumbai. Last year, we acquired Unitop Chemicals, which is a leader in agro-surfactants in India. The aim was to rejuvenate Unitop and put it on the world map, especially with focus on biosurfactants, green surfactants, and surfactants with high biodegradability. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chari. Over to you for a quick introduction.
Hello, thank you, Avinash, and thank you everyone for this session. And hello to everyone in the live session, whoever are attending and the participants. So my name is Pooja Vishnoy. I'm working as a General Manager and Regulatory Head in Oxylife Scientific Services, which is a unit of GPC. So we are a regulatory consultant helping industries to register their agrochemical and biocides in different export markets. So our major focus is in Europe. So here I hold a master degree in environmental engineering, and I've started my career with the environmental impact assessment, environmental behavior, and following that I have passed on to the field of regulatory. So looking forward to a good interaction today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Pooja, Ms. Pooja, for that introduction. As Mr. Rahul said, the purpose of this panel today is to discuss a few topics around sustainability in the agrochemical space, right? And before we dive into that, just wanted to lay out the overall context. So the agrochemical industry finds itself at an interesting juncture. So on the one hand, we are very well positioned to emerge as an agricultural manufacturing hub for exports, right? So it's well positioned there. At the same time, there's a lot of push towards sustainability, right? And there is increasing need for the industry to educate farmers on the judicious use of crop chemicals, right? And it is at this juncture that where the industry finds itself. And the plan is for the next 50-55 minutes is to discuss with our esteemed panelists their perspectives on how is the industry dealing with these topics, right? How does India emerge and grow, and at the same time make sure that it is balanced and all the stakeholders are involved. So that's the overall context for the session today. And with that, just wanted to get us started off with the first set of questions, starting with how has the industry fared during the pandemic, right? How has the industry fared during the pandemic, and how is it set up for success going forward? Would love to get your perspective, Dr. Vishal, from your vantage point in the ministry. So would love to get us started. Over to you, Dr. Vishal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank Indian Chemical News for giving me this opportunity for speaking this important platform. And coming back to your question, Avinashi, that's a really very important question, because for agrochemical sector, or we can say Indian agrochemical industries, one of the most important and crucial industry at present, because in the agrochemical commodity, we are the net exporters. If we go by the stats and figures, then our export today stands at 25,000 crore. 5 years back, it used to be 12,000 crore. So from 12,000 crore, we have just doubled our exports in the agrochemicals. And even during the pandemic situation also, this was the industry which was continuously supported the economy, as well as the country's economy, as well as the farmers. So this is a very crucial and a very important pillar of the economy, and also the bigger umbrella called the chemical sector. So agrochemical sector, if we see, it's fragmented or segmented as insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, and biocides. And the market dynamics keeps on changing in these. And as of now, we can say for last 3-4 years or last 5 years, market dynamics says that herbicides is leading the market share. They are present for around 44 to 45% is herbicides in the today's agrochemical market, Indian domestic market, I'm saying, which is followed by fungicide 27%, and the insecticide segment, which is around 22%. If we see the today's market cost evaluation of Indian agrochemical sector, it's today's market is around 42,000 crores, or 8 billion, around 6 to 7 billion US dollars. And global market, if we see, it's 4.5 lakh crores. So we can see that Indian agrochemical industry holds a share of more than 10% in the global market today. Despite being we are also net exporters. And this is added to the fact that if we see that the consumption of the pesticides per hectare of the land is very less in India. If we compare to our neighbor countries, it is around 17 kilogram for China. In USA, it is around 14 kg, but we have less than 1 kg. We are having only 0.4 kilogram. So seeing the pesticide consumption, and still we are the largest, I mean not the largest, we are the 4th largest in the Asia, and we are the net exporter in this segment. So if we see that our major export destination, if we talk about when we talk about that we are the major net exporters. So our major export destination are Brazil, USA, France, Germany, Belgium, and Japan. These are the 5 nations. If we see the last 3 years data, these are the constant 5 countries where we are exporting, majorly exporting. They hold the major export share of our export of agrochemicals. Similarly, when we talk about the import of agrochemicals, we are importing also. Our import is around 12,000 crore. If we are exporting 25,000 crore, we are also importing. So, but I import, if we see by data, our top 3 countries from where our import is the China, USA, and Belgium. And majority of share is from China. So this is the global scenario for the agrochemical industry. Now, to be very specific, and the current product scenario, if we go by the product-wise scenario, then we see that our major products where we are leading or where we are exporting are mancozeb, acephate, chlorpyrifos, malathion. These are the products which have very good future, good export market as well as domestic demand also. These are the products where we are really leading and we are exporting. On the other hand, chlorine, emmetine, cartap, and imida, these are the products which we are a little bit import dependent, and we lack the domestic production here. So for these products, we are importing. And if we see the country-wise consumption, as earlier also I was told that we compare globally, then our share, if we see the consumption of agrochemicals of last 2 years, then the consumption of India is less than 1%. And for China, it is 43%, and for US, it is more than 10%. So that's also, and again, a good and very good thing for agro, and a very important and a good point for Indian agrochemical industry. So basically, it is only, we can say that it is only because of the availability of good quality of agrochemicals and high efficacy of agrochemicals that our food grains production has reached to 200 million tons. So it was used to only 50 to 60 million, 100 million tons, but now we have reached to 200. So that is only because of there is more crop yield, there is more crop protection because of the quality of presence, availability of good quality of agrochemicals. Now, during the pandemic, the industry, we have seen that agrochemical industry has really emerged out as a champion, and they have really, all the industry, entire industry, and whatever support from government was possible, government was also is also very positive about that. And the one most important strategy which I have in earlier my talks also have suggested, which in Indian agrochemical industry has adopted and also should be adopting in the future, that the approach should be to set up to cover the maximum that value chain. Like if any new setup or an existing industry wants to establish a new facility or scale up the existing facility also, I would suggest that the approach should be to adopt the maximum value chain to cover the intermediate or for the building blocks. Like anybody wants to that start for acephate or that acephate plant, let's say, the approach should be to cover with PCL3 or to DMPAT, like that. Maximum value chain can be covered. Or if we say that if somebody wants to put up a mancozeb plant, then the approach should be to start with that at least at carbon disulfide level. The benefit would be that by starting by capturing a value chain, the manufacturer can have 2 or 3 products in the same facility. With the CS2, just an example only, with the CS2 from EDA and EDA route, mancozeb can be produced. With the CS2 1,2,4-triazolone, the metribuzin can be produced. So likewise, 2 or 3 important fungicides can be produced within the same facility. So that has been the approach of industry last 2-3 years, because there has been an increase in the intermediate and the starting materials production in India, and which is also leading to reduce, not the remarkable, but gradual reduced import dependence on these intermediates. We are now able to, some industries I know are able to produce NATCP, which is an intermediate for chlorpyrifos. DTCL also we are producing. Then CS2 also. Then there are also some the yellow phosphorus based compounds. So the Indian agrochemical industry has started producing them, which is showing the shift towards change, and which will definitely not only the leading exporter, it will help us in becoming Atmanirbhar also very soon. And days are not very far away when Indian agrochemical industry will be the global, we will be the global leader, and this industry will be the global champion of the sector globally. Talking about the sustainable thing also, that all the pesticide formula, I mean, for agrochemical industry, which are having technical pesticides producing plants also. So they can also look to adopt green technology and green chemistry also in their processes, because ultimately for the sustainable approach, green technology and green chemistry has to be adopted. And on a very applicable way, industry can adopt it also. Like very common example that spent acid is a very common effluent in all the in most of the technical pesticides. Let's say pendimethalin also. Now, disposing of this spent acid is it's a very tough task. It's not an easy issue. So because you have to obtain environmental clearances and its transportation, a lot of things needs to be cleared. So to now by adopting the green chemistry, such industry can ask their R&D team or process team to develop certain methods, like by this spent acid can be made react to cetyl alcohol, and with the neutralization, some product like surfactant or any emulsifier can be produced, so that industry does not need to take worry about disposing of the spent acid. In the contrary, it will be utilized in process to produce a usable product, surfactant, which the manufacturer can either sell or can utilize in process for metal powder formulations and other where surfactants and emulsifiers are used. So such green chemistry innovations or such technologies can also be looked upon by the in-process labs also. We don't need to have very large scale R&D for such processes. It's a very ongoing things. The
Okay.
utilization of cetyl alcohol, this spent acid with the cetyl alcohol or with any other alcohol, with any other product, which can give it to at least some utilizable value. So that way, the green technology, the sustainable, goal of sustainable development will also be completed. Green chemistry can also be adopted, and also the revenue generation will be more for industry, since it will help in adding an input material.
Perfect.
So
Doctor.
green chemistry in itself talks about the reduced green cycles and reduce of user less of hazardous waste material, which ultimately helps the economy also. So this is the scenario of agrochemical sector, and I proudly say that we will definitely, days are not far, that with the support of industry and government, we will be a global leader in this sector. So,
Thank you, Dr. Vishal, for that comprehensive overview. I think it's heartening to know that we doubled the exports even during the pandemic. So that's great. And I think your views on sustainability will pick that up in due course as well. Mr. Chari, from an industry player vantage point, right? How do you see the industry evolving? What are your thoughts on that? Would love to hear your perspectives.
Yeah, good morning. The last 2 years have been, a roller coaster ride. 2021 was a good year for agrochemicals. 21-22, I don't think was a very, very good year. But we expect 22-23 to be much better than last year. One thing what we saw last year was increase in prices. Because of the China effect, the supply chain issues, and then also the EO and the propylene oxide shortage, and the rapid rise in crude prices all contributed to showing sales which have gone up by 50, 60, 70%, but the quantities have not increased as much as the value has increased. The future, as Dr. Vishal said, the future is circular economy. To give an example here, Rosary has a lab in IIT Powai. We have 40 scientists working in IIT Powai, inside IIT Powai. And from the mancozeb stream, there is a spent acid, formic acid stream which is coming out, and we have put this to use, and we have been using this product regularly. Formic acid is an essential part of mancozeb manufacturing. Similarly, what we see the trend in the last 2 years is also the Indian agrochemical industry waking up, especially the domestic ones, because the multinationals already are aware and cognizant of the fact to shift to sustainability or greener surfactants. But the Indian chemical industry, agrochemical industry, is also actively looking at newer molecules, looking at cost. We are new to agrochemicals from Rosary, but Unitop has been in agrochemicals now for 20 years. What we see is still a lot of things which worry, especially if we see non-alkyl ethoxylates or the alkyl phenol ethoxylates. And still there is widespread use. It is not a good surfactant to consider in terms of sustainability, biodegradability, and the effect on aquatic organisms. But we see widespread use, which needs to stop. The industry will wake up, I think, to the needs and follow. The Indian agrochemical per capita consumption is amongst the lowest in the world. So we see a very, very good future for agrochemicals. We also see a very good future for exports from India. Unitop has 50 EPA and REACH registrations, and we see from last year to this year, a lot of export inquiries now, especially Latin and South America, and also from the Asian countries. Gradually, India is becoming very competitive in downstream manufacturing. The worry is that a lot of active ingredients are being manufactured, but the intermediates are still coming from China. So this is something which we need to put our heads together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chari. I think we'll talk about how could India emerge as an exporter of agrochemicals down the line. Coming to the domestic market, right? I think we've heard both from Mr. Chari and from Dr. Vishal that the per capita consumption is amongst the lowest, right? So clearly there are a lot of opportunities over there. But would love to hear your perspective, Dr. Ravi. As FMC is a key player in the market, clearly there are opportunities, but as I understand, there are also certain challenges, be it supply chain, be it regulations. So, would love to get your perspective, Dr. Ravi, on what do you see from a domestic business perspective.
Sure. Thanks, Avinash. So really pleased to hear from Dr. Chaudhary and Dr. Chari. Uh, from my perspective, the Indian agrochemical industry, especially from a domestic consumption perspective, it's a very secular business, and a lot of secular growth opportunities for this. Main reason is, see, everybody needs food. Food security is a huge issue, especially in the current context of inflation and what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine war, and overall commodity squeeze. Food security is a big issue, and India is very fortunate that we have the largest agrarian land in the world. If you look at, even more than US or any country in the world, we have the largest area, which is arable. But the amount of use of agrochemicals, as Dr. Chaudhary pointed out, it's very low, right, compared to anywhere else in the world. And we have impact of that because if you look at the losses from a farm productivity perspective, more than 2 lakh crores a year of productivity is lost on the field. 15 to 20% of our entire produce is lost in the field because of improper care of the crops as they grow. So the pest coverage, weeds, diseases, I mean, these are the things that are causing those losses. So there's a growing need for this, and there's also a growing awareness. So if you look at the farmer today, the farmer is becoming very much more information savvy. 4G penetration has increased. There's a lot of access to information than before. So farmers are getting savvy. Also companies which are operating in the country, like FMC, constantly educating the farmers, right? Explaining to them how better care of the crops can lead to better overall yield, on the fields. Because today our yields are much lower compared to global averages. So there's a room to increase the yields of the farmland by almost, you could even increase it by 100% or more. So there's a lot of room. There's significant opportunities in the field of agriculture in terms of, the ability of agriculture to contribute to the Indian economy broadly. And agrochemicals can play a huge role in that journey. So that's what I look at. So in terms of the trends, it's very secular. This industry will continue to grow. And to talk about sustainability, it's a critical area, where again the awareness of the farmer and of the average consumer is going up. So it's not just a buzzword; there is real implications. So what you see and what you will see in the future is not just sustainability, talked about as from an environment perspective, but also real implications in terms of the kind of products, the kind of chemicals that will be used on the field. And it's very important that we use those chemicals which have the right sustainability profile. So it's not just about protecting the crop, but it's also about taking care of the environment around you, that there is no impact on beneficial insects, that it's safe, it's used in the right way. And again, that's where companies like FMC play a big role, because it just doesn't happen overnight. You have to invest millions of dollars, billions of dollars in R&D. It takes tens of years to actually come up with the right chemistries which are only targeting the specific pest or disease or insect or weed, but leaving everything unscathed. So it takes a lot of work on biology, on chemistry, and that research then has to translate into the right kind of manufacturing at scale. So all this takes a long time, right? But I think companies like ours can play a big role in that. There's a bright future in this area, and this will absolutely grow in the future. So I see that as a key contributor for future growth. Then talking about sustainability from a manufacturing angle, again, as Dr. Chaudhary pointed out, and Mr. Chari also said, we got to make sure that we are taking care of the environment when we are doing the manufacturing. So initiatives such as zero liquid discharge, right? This is very, very important. So how do you ensure that the manufacturing is self-sustainable, and it's having the minimum impact on the environmental footprint? And also not only about using solvents and things like that, but also energy. So, can you generate energy on site? Can you use solar and other sources? So how do we minimize the footprint, not only, from a manufacturing standpoint, but also from a usage standpoint? So you got to look at the business end to end, but that's where the industry is headed. That's where this business is headed. And that's going to create a lot of opportunities for, good corporations who are willing to invest in R&D, who are willing to take the long-term view, And those are the kind of companies that will succeed, and that's where this business is headed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for that overview. I think it's heartening to know that organizations like yourself are thinking about sustainability. So that's great, both from manufacturing as well as outreach, and we'll touch upon that. Ms. Pooja, from your perspective, are there, from a domestic business perspective, are there any regulatory challenges, barriers that you think could impact the growth for the country or growth for the sector? Would love to hear your perspectives.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Avinash, and thank you, Dr. Ravi, for your insight. So, in line to what Dr. Ravi mentioned, that is, very much clear that we are in a country where the demand is increasing day by day. However, we are not able to cope up with the losses because of the pest, weeds, or other diseases. So yes, the major aim to grow in an agrochemical industry focuses on two factors. One is increasing the domestic demand as per the requirement, and other is increasing the export business. And that's where the agrochemical industry will tend to grow and focus more on the requirements. So like in the regulatory framework, when we talk about it, all goes hand in hand. In a regulatory framework, it is important that we had awareness about the safety of the molecules and the formulations to the farmers and the environment. However, according to my views, there should be a balance between the need, the requirement, and we should know how the world is growing and what are the problems. When we identify the problems, we can get to the point that we know where is a need and how it should be fulfilled. So if we have to increase the growth in the sector, and also on in hand, we should be in an area where we can develop the more food requirements as a developing country, and as a growing population we have. So the important points are that spreading the awareness to the farmers about the right choices of the agrochemicals to be used on which pests, which weeds. They should have a clear idea where to use what type of chemicals. And then a level of the RTO formulation that is ready to use, which makes their life easy, and how it becomes more interesting for them as well to inculcate that into the practices. Then there should be an effective chain of pesticide reaching to these farmers and the workers, and also understanding the need as per the location, as per the crop, and as per the disease which is evolving, because the disease is not going to stay in a similar way. Like we have seen in the COVID, everything, the mutation happens, the changes happen. Same way with the disease, with the pest as well. So we need to innovate new molecules. We have to do certain aspect in the form of R&D. And there, the regulators and the regulatory framework should be made in such a manner that the companies who are doing the R&D, or the companies who are, MNC and working on R&D outside India, they should be able to bring these new molecules to India without any, a danger. Like we have a way of doing patent, and then a company can bring and have a whole market. In the similar line, there are many new molecules which are around the world, but not in India, because of certain various factors which need to be evolved in the regulatory framework to make the life easy for the applicants and for the manufacturer who are trying to bring these molecules to India, or who are bringing these molecules and manufacturing in India. So we can have some types of data protections and, the policy where they can be also getting some benefit out of it, so that, they are happy to bring these molecules to market, which is, at the end helping our industry and helping our people to grow. And also the food chain and the crop losses will be less. So the major angle is that people should understand the need, and then according to the need, the pesticide and everything should be marketed, or the awareness should be created. One additional challenge which I see is that there are many pesticides which are registered, but only on the major crops. There are many labels which are not being explored. The minor crops, or the crops which are not used so wisely, there are no labels, or no product in the market. So that need to be channelized by the regulatory framework, in order that we can have a system of crop grouping or managing in such a way that if it is registered in a major crop, we can have some, we can reduce the requirements in the minor crops, so that increase the label. And if the label claims are increased, farmer will be more, analysis, and will be able to understand that, okay, these crops can be used for these pests. So these all area need to be explored. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pooja. I think that is very insightful. The fact that that most of the pesticides, as you could expect, are focused on the major crops, and hence some of the minor crops which are probably money generators for farmers getting ignored. So I think very interesting, and I think insightful over there. Dr. Ravi, as we've heard thus far, sustainability is clearly a theme, right? And at the other part is India's consumption of agrochemicals is still very low, right? So how do you balance the growth in agrochemicals at the same time be judicious around it is going to become increasingly important a conversation to have with the farmers. Industry bodies and industries and companies like yourself at Syngenta, what is it that you're doing? How is it that you could help farmers in this journey? Would love to get some perspectives on that.
Thank you, Avinash. The first point that I want to make is sustainability is no longer a good to have. It has become a must have. Secondly, sustainability is also not CSR or charity, as is often misunderstood. And the third point is sustainability is everyone's responsibility. So having said that, we often don't give enough credit for the tremendous contribution this sector, agrochemical sector, has made to not only agriculture growth, but sustainable agriculture growth in India. So if you look at the productivity aspect, most of the agrochemicals in India, which have significantly helped reduce production losses from pests and disease attacks, owe their introduction to the R&D based crop sciences industry. So these companies have been at the forefront of innovation, contributing to the first time introduction of more than 90% of the crop protection products in use today. So such products have enabled us to tackle virtual national crop emergencies. We all know what the Phalaris minor weed in wheat did to us, Heliotis, Armigera, bollworm in cotton, or brown plant hopper, insect pest in rice. And all these were we could avoid because of the advancements in the agrochemical sector. So second, let's look at the sustainable aspect. Like I said, one was the production, the second is the sustainable. We also don't give the industry credit on how they have been reducing the environmental footprint. The R&D based crop sciences industry has been launching, as Dr. Vishal and speakers before me have said, new molecules with increased efficacy and reduced application rates. The application rates in the case of insecticides such as organophosphates and carbamates during the 60s and 70s were, as you all know, as high as 1,000 to 3,000 grams of active ingredient per hectare. By the 80s, with the advent of cartrep and synthetic pyrethroids, the rates came down to 50 to 500 grams per hectare. And from the 90s to the early 2000s, you see, there was further advancements through moderate toxicity chemicals and triazoles and neonicotinoids and you name it, having dosages of only 25 to 200 grams per hectare. And since the mid 2000s, the active ingredients have in fact come down to below 100 grams in some cases and even 4 grams per hectare in chemistries like diamides. And so the pursuit towards greener chemistries, which all my previous speakers have said, continues, and the industry is well aware of its responsibility to reduce the environmental footprint. But the perception, unfortunately, is still as though chemicals are mixed randomly by hand in a shady shack. This has to change. The perception has to be broken. There is also another misconception that needs to be highlighted here, and that is the notion that India already consumes a lot of agrochemicals. So this has been alluded to before. See, the global average consumption of pesticides is 3 kgs per hectare, while India consumes only 0.3 kgs per hectare. In contrast, as has been alluded by the other speakers, China consumes 13 kgs, Japan 11 kgs, and Brazil 4.7 kgs. As a consequence, Indian agriculture productivity, as Ravi also pointed out, per hectare is also very low because of unavailability of newer and better technology. For any new crop protection molecules, again, it takes 11 years of intensive R&D and an average investment of about 300 USD to bring it to the market. So this is another aspect that needs to be looked into. Out of 1,175 molecules available globally, only 294 are registered. Whereas in the EU, US and Brazil, they have around 450 to 750 approved molecules. So closer home, if you want to compare, Vietnam and Pakistan also have more than 500 registered molecules. So these statistics only indicate one stark fact that there is limited choice for our farmers to have to fight against the ever increasing host of pests and diseases. But I think a further analysis is what is more revealing. Out of all this 292 registered, only 75 molecules, as Pooja said, and the combinations are being used to protect 140 million hectares of diverse Indian agriculture crops. So therefore, the first and foremost thing to inculcate in the minds of the stakeholders is that industry needs to be given an enabling environment to bring newer and greener chemistries. Then, of course, is the continuous extension activities and hand-holding training that is required for inculcating the 3 Rs: spraying at the right time, spraying the right dose, and in the right way. So I will end by my comments with the example of what Syngenta, you also alluded to, as what Syngenta is up to. So over a decade, Syngenta has rolled out its commitment in the form of a good growth plan, a bold mission statement outlining a plan to make farming both more resilient and sustainable. We were among the first companies to come up with a public commitment to increase the productivity of key crops in the world by 20% without using more water, more land, or more inputs. So the opportunity to work closely with the farmers to make their lives better by growing food in a sustainable way is something we are passionate about. We are continuously coming up with new initiatives to make farming smarter. Syngenta is in fact committed $2 billion for research into new agricultural methods to raise crop yields in a sustainable way by 2025, aiming to deliver 2 technology breakthroughs every year. Not only will this benefit those most in need, it will also put India on a path towards carbon neutral farming, enhancing the biodiversity and soil health of 3 million hectares of rural land every year through a series of synchronous measures, including educating 8 million farm workers while pushing for fair pay across the sector. So this approach, we believe, prioritizes the health of those working on the land, so which is very important, and the land itself, as their fortunes are interlinked. And if biodiversity and soil quality are improved, then so are the livelihoods. The results so far have exceeded all our expectations, to be frank. By 2020, globally, USD 496 million has been plowed back into improving seed and planting technologies, and more than 1 million tons of crops have been harvested using more effective crop protection programs. In addition, 4 million hectares of farmland benefited from soil conservation, biodiversity enhancement measures, resulting in a reduction of 2 million tons of carbon. Training millions of laborers and land technicians in safer ways of working has also led to a huge drop in number of injuries and sickness. Globally, Syngenta is already well on its way to halving its carbon emissions by 2030 in line with the Paris Agreement. Part of its remit is to fund community projects that help impoverished farmers get fair prices for their produce. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi, for sharing perspectives both at an industry and at a Syngenta level. And clearly, there's a lot that needs to be done as we move along in this journey. Dr. Vishal would love to understand, how is the government thinking about this? If there are any specific initiatives that have been launched that you think are in the works and that would benefit the farmers. Would love to hear that from you. Dr. Vishal, you're on mute. Yeah.
No, actually, that there was some network issue. I couldn't hear that. Please, can you please?
Sure. So, Dr. Vishal, I think we spoke about sustainability and the fact that it is, the industry is doing its effort of bringing newer molecules in. What is it that the government is doing from sustainability to make sure that there's judicious use of crop protection in India.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. That's a very important aspect. Actually, basically, it's the that it is very much required that the safe and judicious usage of pesticides should be known to the farmer. And government, I mean the Department of Chemicals also, we have a scheme of Chemical Promotion Development Scheme, CPDS scheme. And I will just like to inform them through CPDS scheme, we are supporting such knowledge dissemination programs, which are being conducted by IPFT and our PSU HIL India Limited. They are regularly conducting such programs wherein the safe and judicious use of pesticides to farmers. These programs are conducted at Kochi, Kisan Vikas Kendra, and nearly mostly in the rural areas, and the target is the farmer. Most of the number of farmers is the target, and there the faculty from the universities and the experts from the industry, we call them and they give that knowledge dissemination, and they tell about how to use the PPEs and how to use what is should be the correct dosage. So that is about the safe and judicious use of pesticides, which government is supporting. Department of Agriculture is also doing that. But however, Department of Chemicals through our CPDS scheme, we are organizing such knowledge dissemination programs continuously. And what I suggest that such programs should be designed for dealers also, because for farmers, dealer is the ultimate scientist. Because whenever a farmer goes to the dealer shop, so even I'm also basically farming. I'm also from farming community only. So whenever I in my village I go and I see my brothers and my colleagues and friends who are doing the good agriculture practices. So even they will not listen to me, although I'm seeing this percent fee, but they will more rely on the dealer. If dealer say that this is the good product and you should use that. So what I suggest that the programs for dealers should also be organized for more, and dealers should be sensitized to disseminate the farmer correctly. It should not be, because it is a dealer should look at it in a larger aspect as a welfare of society, not as a business aspect on this point at least. So the correct dosage, I'm not saying that which company he prefers, the correct dosage of pesticides should and other agrochemical should be told to farmer very clearly that this should be dosed and this should be the targeted crop. And for this, dealers should be also be sensitized along with the farmers. Government is doing that, and I also request industry to also do that. Most industries are doing that, but if they also, it should be scaled up on a higher scale. It's on a district wise and zone wise level it should be.
Understand, Dr. Vishal. It's perfectly fair because of the size and scale of Indian agriculture. The more hands that help out on this would be much appreciated. So it's a fair point. Changing tracks a bit, we spoke about domestic market. The Indian agrochemicals sector is expected to be a big driver of exports, right? Some people alluded to becoming the next IT sector in some ways, right? So no pressures, but but just in terms of from your perspective, how is Indian agrochemicals sector positioned from an export market perspective? What is it that is working well for India, and where do you see opportunities where India can do better? Mr. Chari, would love to hear your perspectives first in terms of where do you see those opportunities from a player in the media space.
Excellent input from Dr. Ravi Anavarapu and Dr. Ravi Casey and also Mr. Vishal Chaudhary. As you said, the IT sector has put Indian exports on the world map. Indian agrochemicals can definitely do it. We need to change our mindset from copycat. Till now, what we saw is to copy multinationals, to do whatever already is researched and just fine-tune recipes and break into whatever they've done. So, what can we give to the world? Biosurfactants is something which the Indian chemical industry could look at giving it to the world. Bioremediation, soil remediation, increased availability, bioactivity of the actives at a much reduced cost. And what is the beauty? As Dr. Ravi Anavarapu said, there is huge amount of food wastage. Now, can this food wastage be used to make biosurfactant? So we are seeing a lot of things. Another thing is research which we are doing is using some sticking agents, which are of course eco-friendly based on silicon technology, to prevent wash down of the pesticide emulsions or pesticide actives from the plants. So because India is a tropical country, and so is many big agriculture countries. Rainfall is frequent, and you spray pesticide and then it gets washed away, and then it contaminates the soil. So this is something which we are working on the silicon backbone. The silicon ethoxylates and propoxylates could change a lot of things into, as Dr. Ravi said, that the amount of actives in the formulation, as it gets reduced and the efficacy gets increased, similarly, the amount of surfactant in the formulation has to reduce. And can we, with the same amount of less amount of actives in surfactants, can we give a more synergistic effect? This is what it is. The worrying part is we should not neglect India. So as we see the pesticide express from Punjab every week going to Bikaner every Friday, we have been talking to dealers of agrochemicals. The usage of agrochemicals, if agrochemical company suggests 20 grams, the farmer is using 100 grams, 60 grams. This is something indiscriminate use has to stop. So we have to tighten our home first, clean up our home first, and then look at the export market. But the Indian export market can boom only if we give something new to the world, something which is better, something which is good for the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chari. Dr. Ravi, would love to hear your perspectives in terms of what are the strengths which have allowed India to go thus far, and what is it that will take India further. So over to you.
Yep, thank you. Thanks for that question. So I would agree with Mr. Chari. I mean, I think we have a long way to go in terms of growing this overall business of agrochemicals in the country, not just the domestic business, but also the export business. And what I would say, it's not delinked. These are both linked tightly with each other. If you have a strong domestic business, then you also create that base, which creates a strong base for future exports. What we have going for us is we already have a very strong base of industry asset base. So you look at the Gujarat petrochemical complex and the manufacturing industry that's come around that. I think that's a strong base. There's a local scientific pool, scientific and engineering pool. I think our chemists and chemical engineers are one of the best in the world. And I can say this because I have interacted with people both in India and abroad. And I can tell you, we produce one of the best chemists and chemical engineers the world has seen, right? So I think that we have that going for us. And that will only build. The key would be to then, link that to get the excitement towards our industry, which is so critical, but which has been much maligned, right? So we got to change the perception, and we got to get the brightest minds engaged in the field of agrochemicals, both on the chemistry side and on the biology side. We are at a very important moment, as you put in your opening remarks. Right now the geopolitics is such that people are looking away from the traditional sources, and they are looking at India as one of the key sources. So there's a lot of diversification. China used to be the biggest source and continues to be, but there's real conversations happening in all the multinationals and other companies that India should be an up and coming source. So this is the opportunity, but the window is short. So we got to act quickly. So while the opportunity is there, people are evaluating, and I can speak to you from many conversations I have had personally that there's a lot of potential that India has from a manufacturing perspective. But we got to nurture that. We got to make it easier for companies to be able to help drive that growth. So what would make that happen? So I would say a clear regime on IP and data protection, so that companies feel confident to bring the latest and greatest innovations into India, and they feel comfortable that there is transparency, that things are being enforced in a fair and transparent manner and quickly, so that objectively and quickly, so that it's predictable. So predictability is key. for companies to come and invest in India. So the regulatory regime has to be predictable. We have to have incentives. So PLI for the Indian agrochemical industry is not yet taken off, and this is something that's been on the table. So that's really important. I think that happens. More and more investments will come. We got to have judiciary which acts quickly. I referenced that already, but we sometimes when there are some challenges, then we just get stuck, right? And it takes a long time for resolution. So how can we fast track and create that clarity and transparency? So those are some of the things that are very important. But from our perspective, from FMC's perspective, we are very keen on continuing the investments in India. We have already done a very important alliance with UPL on manufacturing one of our largest active ingredients, which is CTPR. We call it Rynaxypyr, where UPL is tolling that for us. So which facilitates the growth of the local industry. So there is a win-win possible here. It's not us versus somebody else. There's a lot of room for collaboration. There's a lot of room for doing things jointly, and there's a lot of room for bringing the best of the actives within the country. Not only for export, but also for the benefit of the local farmer, right? So we got to get more registrations. We got to get more choice, as Dr. Ravi from Syngenta pointed out. I think the farmers need more choice, absolutely critical. And while that happens, automatically the base of manufacturing will shift towards India. So it's not delinked. I would reinforce that point. The domestic and the export industry is not delinked, and we got to look at a holistic perspective on that. And we got to look at agrochemicals as a critical driver for overall growth of the economy and for the exports, so that we set the import-export balance right for the country. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. I think the point around talent and availability of quality talent, and at the same time, improving the ease of doing business is critical for any industry. So fair input. Coming back to the domestic business, and I think Dr. Ravi, you alluded to this, that the farmer is getting extremely savvy, right, from a technology perspective. What are some of the technologies which are being adopted globally, and what is it that you think will come to India, be it around drones, be it around satellite imagery? What is it that is gaining traction on the ground in India, and where do you see that evolving in the coming years? Dr. Ravi from Syngenta, just share.
Yeah, thank you, Avinash. I guess technology adoption and sustainability are closely interlinked. We cannot distinguish them. So technologies like artificial intelligence and digitization has the ability to transform agriculture in a big way, and more importantly, in a sustainable way. I'll come to it a little later on how it happens. And with technologies like sensors, so right now the prices are prohibitively high, but the kind of sensors available today, plants would soon be talking to us, saying exactly what it requires and in what doses. So we are already witnessing, and we are in the cusp of a drone revolution. So as we all know, there's been a buzz around that. The landmark move to scale up and use of drones in agriculture following PM's push to the technology, I think, in my opinion, will pave way for immense possibilities and usher India into a new era of technology-led growth and innovative pursuits by farmers and farming communities. So Indian agriculture is ready to embrace the next big thing in agri-tech, and that is drone spraying, as we all know. And this will have multifold benefits and help farmers overcome challenges of labor, which is very well known, not available. This will also lead to a sharper focus on precision farming and regenerative agriculture. So as we speak today, digital applications, all of our companies, all of my colleagues will be agreeing that they're already in a major part of the farmer's DNA today and are being used in a big way for advisory services, even financing, and you name it. So there will be more focus on how we integrate all these services with the primary objective of making farmers even more easy to kind of adopt agriculture. Because the first challenge today is we are not able to motivate, because if already agriculture was not easy, it is becoming more and more difficult with the climate change and other associated challenges and new pests that are emerging. So looking at the future, I would like to mention here a biodiversity sensor project that we are working on. So this, we believe, will transform how we measure biodiversity in a climate change context. And as we all know, biodiversity is declining at a precipitous rate. And this decline has serious implications for agriculture, given farmers' reliance on biodiversity to sustain a healthy balance between nature and ensure the resilience of food production. So with the world population to grow to 10 billion, Avinash, by 2050, studies show that crop yields will need to increase significantly. But to mitigate the impact on climate and nature, this must be done without using more natural habitat. So farmers need to increase the yields to feed the world over the coming decades, while at the same time preserving biodiversity, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and otherwise protecting the environment. To understand biodiversity and how best to protect it, the world needs more on the ground, in the field data that is currently being captured. So that is the first thing. Syngenta, with the partners of IIT Roper and and uh, uh, German institute, are using its digital and biology know-how to spearhead a new biodiversity monitoring technology that we are preliminarily calling it the biodiversity sensor project. So we have built a low-cost, solar-powered, state-of-the-art motion capturing system that would draw on the artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms to identify and quantify all moving species. We have heard from Dr. Vishal and others, automatically, autonomously, and reliably, and at scale. So this is will be the first, meant to be the world's first 24/7 biodiversity monitoring technology, featuring a centralized biodiversity data repository that can be shared and tracked with the goal of accelerating the accuracy of biodiversity measurements across the planet. So we have a preliminary project, and limitations are not coming from the technology. That's the interesting part, but from its adoption. Therefore, our intention is to partner with key stakeholders such as researchers, policymakers, and NGOs to eventually establish a biodiversity network across the globe. So the initial phase, as I said, of the effort will be to identify and quantify insect life in and around farms, to better track and measure the population of insects that contribute to a healthy agriculture biosphere. Eventually, the hope is to broaden this technology to detect other habitats as well. So as the world's leading agriculture technology company, Syngenta is committed to developing and scaling a series of breakthrough innovations that will allow farmers to feed the world while respecting the earth. The adoption of economically and ecological benefits that agriculture practices, and the establishment of rules, policies, and recommendations in support of such practices requires that farmers be able to measure and monitor and report the state of biodiversity on their land. So this is what we are committed to tackling, and the global challenge of feeding the world by respecting the earth. We've been investing, like I said, 1.4 billion in a year in R&D, and we have about 6,500 employees working in R&D globally. So one of the primary goals is to identify, develop, and scale a series of innovative breakthroughs, transformations that will enable the world's farmers to increase yields while increasing environmental sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. Dr. Vishal, Dr. Ravi alluded to the fact that there is technology which is available in plenty, or is available. As the government and as a key stakeholder, would love to get your perspectives in terms of how is it that you are driving adoption? How is it that you're facilitating the adoption of technology from a government standpoint? Dr. Vishal, over to you. Dr. Vishal, you're on mute.
Yeah, now is it audible? Yes.
Yeah, now you're.
Can you please repeat the question? Actually, there is some issue. I don't know where.
No worries. Dr. Vishal, you were speaking about technology and adoption of the same. What Dr. Ravi alluded to is technology is available. There are a lot of use cases, a lot of establishment of proof of concepts. What is lacking is adoption by the farmers, right? Or adoption at the ground, grassroots levels. So, from your perspective as the government, how is it that you are driving adoption? Was the question for you?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's really a very important point. And basically, any success of any technology depends upon the adoption by the end user. So that's really, I mean, that's the point on which government is also working. And actually, it should be a team effort. Industry along with the government should come along. We all have to come along. And then our basic purpose should be to make farmer understand about the technology. Let it be, for example, the let's say drone technology. It's a very useful and it's a very new research and innovative way. And because the farmer, now we have to tell farmer that the process is very simple. It's not farmer may feel. I know that farmer feel that it's a very difficult how where he has to go, to whom he has to approach, and such things may come in the farmer's mind. We have to just make farmer understand that it's a very simplified and a very normal process. All the guidelines are all this already given in the DGCA website. The area where it can be used, where it cannot be used, is very well defined. And the Central Insecticides Codes Registration Committee and CIB has also approved certain usage in the crops for for certain chemicals. So for those things should be, but all those things should be made aware to farmer. Farmer should be knowledge disseminated for all those things. And with government industry in the collaboration can do some demo or demonstration experiments sort of things to the fields and the farmers to show to the way we are doing the safe and judicial usage of knowledge dissemination programs. Similarly, we can have such for to make such technologies more applicable and more successful at the ground level. I suggest that we should work on such programs that we can have such one demo experiment of a drone technology, so that farmers can understand that it's not a very tough process. It's a very good, actually, it will be a very best approach in the coming years. So that way, but that way can only be happen if the government, along with the industry experts, because ultimately the industry has to use that and has to, I mean, the scale up that whatever the technology is there. Industry has to scale it up and then to transfer it to the end user. So government can support, provide the support in the making it successful, but it should be a joint effort. And both, again, I will say the industry experts and the government, along with the government, should work as a team to make farmer understand about all these technologies and developments being taking place in the agriculture, so that the farmer of our country also adopt the best agriculture practices as per the international standards, which already we are doing, and the India has the potential for doing that, to become the global leader in not only the agrochemical industry but also in the good agriculture practices also. So that will be my suggestion.
Fair, Dr. Vishal. I think industry and government need to work on this together. Throughout the course of this discussion, we've heard a few policy recommendations, but just to wrap it all up, Ms. Pooja, would love to hear your perspectives on what are some of your recommendations for the government, for the different stakeholders, if we were to strengthen agriculture practices, agrochemicals as an industry. What are some of the recommendations you would have for the government stakeholders? Ms. Pooja?
Hello. So, like the pesticide industry is evolving in the similar line, India is in a phase where the regulations are also revolving and updating. And I am hopeful that in coming days, India will have a regulation which will be more efficient. Both in the perspective of the safety as well as for the applicants who are actually applying, be it a manufacturer or importer or exporter. When we talk about a regulatory framework and when we compare a developing country regulations with a developed country, we understand that there are many major differences. Some are on the positive sides and some are not so, the positive sides. So when we talk about that, what, I would like to recommend that should be taken into consideration when we are talking about indigenous manufacturing area, That is, we need to understand the scientific analysis. We need to promote our industry or our manufacturer to move ahead and take up new and new molecules which are coming up in the world and in the global scenario. So we have to the regulators may have a research program to understand that how these molecules have been registered in the different countries. We can take and we can do the research, and we can do and take the evaluation done by the developed countries like in Europe or in US or in Australia. So we can use that data to analyze about the safety and about the concerns of those chemicals in the agriculture work or in the agriculture framework. So there should be more promotions towards the acceptance of justifications, scientific reasoning and waiver, which can help in reducing certain studies, and as well as can help in reducing the cost of registrations, which will motivate the manufacturer or the importer to bring and add new molecules, or the molecules which are not yet in India but are used widely in the globe. So we have to understand that there are many areas where we can work on. Like earlier I mentioned that we can have a system where we understand what are the major crops and minor crops, so that there is a balance between those two when we are registering for any molecules or any formulation in India, which is actually helping the industry to make a regulator understand that how their molecule can help the nation, as well as when the domestic use or the domestic manufacturers are looking forward to those things, that will also help them in the export business. Because when you understand the regulatory framework of our own country, and which is actually in continuation with the developed country, it becomes easy for the manufacturer to go and ahead and promote their products for the export market. So that is also very necessary. Other thing is that we can promote the data sharing. That data sharing is very important, where it can reduce the cost as well as reduce the vertebrate testing. So that can be promoted in such a way that it can, be helpful to both environment, ecology, as well as the manufacturer and importers. So that is also major thing. Currently, our industry majorly rely on the generic product. And as we are using generic product day by day in a large quantity, that will also give the resistance to the pest and the disease. So what is happening? We have to mix up and bring new molecules so that we are able to fight with the new challenges of the pest and disease. So all that will together increase the fair chances for the importer and for the indigenous manufacturer to increase the path and bringing the more and more molecules which are good and which are used in less quantity as compared to the traditional and old molecules which are still available in the market. Other thing is that we have to understand that there are certain aspects called assessing the risk in the developed country. So we should be in a position to assess the risk, both in the way that how the farmers are taking up for their health, for the use and for the demand increase in the country, and also about the impact on the environment and impact on the health. So that can be contributed, and that is not going to increase the cost, but it is going to help the regulators to understand how the chemical is going to react or can predict that how it is going to happen and can take up from there. So that all things can be considered, and we can also move forward and have a process where the re-evaluation of the molecules need to be done, where we understand that these molecules are currently required, or the other substitutes which are better, or which can be used in less quantity, less hazardous and more effective, that can be brought. So the substitution can also play an important role. So all these factors can together help all the industry, which is the manufacturer, importer or the exporter, in bringing and maintaining this industry in a more horizon way. So I hope that in India, with the developing nation and with the developing in the regulation, in coming days we will have a more efficient and more comprehensive and reasoning regulations, which will help in the entire agrochemical industry to bloom, and also our farmers and the need will be included in that part. Thank you.
Thanks, Pooja. I think a reasonable regulatory regime is a fair input. Dr. Ravi, any final words from you from the industry perspective?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Avinash. as the chairman of CropLife India, I get an opportunity to interact with key ministers and bureaucrats in various forums. And I'm definitely convinced that agrochemical industry in India has a flourishing future, provided an enabling policy landscape is created for the sector. So what do I mean by that? So I've also been following the government's intention to promote India as an agrochemical hub, especially when we are facing this unprecedented COVID pandemic. So the pandemic has once again reminded us the vulnerability of supply chains and brought the focus back to making Indian manufacturing robust. So building a robust agrochemical industry is even more important, as I've been saying, because of the additional responsibility of helping farmers in tackling the multifarious challenges that Indian agriculture faces. So we need the industry to provide all kinds of technologies, solutions, and practices to overcome the challenges and increase the productivity and profitability. And as we've all been talking about, in a sustainable manner. So I would now like to outline 6 policy initiatives, which in my opinion is absolutely essential for creating that enabling environment. So Ravi and others before me have said there is a need for a predictable science-based policy and regulatory regime for building a robust manufacturing base in the country. So what do I mean by that? Registration timelines has been spoken about. Internationally, it takes less than half the time to register products as compared to India. There is an imminent need to look at the registration timelines and bring it in line with international norms without, of course, compromising on the safety and efficacy and sustainable aspects which we all have agreed upon. There is a need. How do you translate that? So therefore, there is a need to accord priority for molecules to be introduced first time in the country through separate cell. All registration categories under section 9(3), for instance, for molecules to be introduced first time in the country should be given priority. So new molecule introduction will get automatically encouraged and facilitated. So there is a need to adopt global best practices. And what do I mean by that? I'll give you one simple example. Minor changes legislation. At present, any minor change to the recipe is like a new registration in India and leads to enormous delays. Internationally, minor changes are allowed without the need for elaborate data requirements all over again. So the Ministry of Agriculture had taken the right step to constitute a committee as far back as 2014. India should also allow minor changes without requirement of large amount of data at the earliest. And upgradation of labs is another important issue. India should implement the OECD requirements in letter and spirit and encourage data generation under good laboratory practices. Peer review on toxicological data should be adopted by India, similar to the pattern adopted by OECD member countries. Second, any hasty decision to ban or a policy environment restricting use of introduction of new molecules will be like throwing the baby along with the bathwater. Industry and government should work towards ensuring that the farmers are equipped with the best technologies to produce more from less in an environmentally sustainable manner. The third and the most important, which is we are all debating today, is the pesticide management bill. Another great opportunity to bring in a predictable, progressive, science-based legislation in place of the age-old Insecticide Act of 1968. Provisions like criminalization of offences in the PMB does not augur well, and it shakes the confidence of the industry. The offenders, no doubt, need to be dealt with, but the genuine players should not suffer for this. Similarly, some of the regulatory provisions like re-registration and certain provisions will affect ease of doing business, and more importantly, will restrict new molecule introductions. So necessary for the farmers in an extremely complex and environment and pest pressures. It also needs to ensure, and this has been adequately explained before, that there is a need for a duration of protection of regulatory data for the first time registrants. This will enable them to not only recoup some of their investments, we have already spoken about the huge investments that are involved, but also steward the product so properly. a period of exclusivity is granted all across the world, and it is allowed under the WTO and TRIPS guidelines. So in fact, I would call this not as data protection, it would be innovation protection. So the Indian industry, Indian manufacturing, where today 95% of the molecules have been introduced by MNCs, so-called MNCs versus domestic, will go once you create this environment so that the domestic industry comes up and starts, incentivized to produce and innovate. Fourth, the government has rightly identified artificial intelligence, and I have said the immense possibilities that can bring to the agriculture space, and they should be it should be explored for making farming sustainable. And fifth, manufacturing and logistics infrastructure. It goes without saying that we need to create world-class manufacturing and logistics infrastructure by way of industrial parks, or it may be easy environmental clearances, or centralized pollution treatment plants, or power, water, and other infrastructure. State-of-the-art infrastructure in roads and ports will also help reduce time and cost, besides boosting competitiveness. And the last and the most important, in my opinion, is the need for private sector and government to work towards bringing in newer and safer technologies through public-private partnerships. So if government is talking about agrochemicals as a champion sector, and a blueprint has to be designed for making the sector more robust. Both domestic and multinational companies have helped the sector to grow tremendously in India. The strengths of both can be used instead of, being jaundiced towards, domestic, and it is not worthwhile to consider this as a debate. So we are this far, and we have all multinationals in India have also been in India for decades, if not for 9 decades and 10 decades and all of that. So this distinction should go, and we should, like Ravi also said, we are also helping Indian manufacturing by tying up with them and kind of bringing in new technologies and know-how. I think that is the most important point. In my opinion, if these 6 are taken care of, I think we have a very, very bright future for the agrochemical industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. I think the 6-point agenda is very valid and probably easy to remember as well. And we do look forward to hearing from the government as well in due course. But with that, would like to end this panel. It's been an immensely engaging session. Great opportunities to learn from all the industry stalwarts. I personally found it very useful, and I'm sure so did the participants. Lastly, would like to thank Indian Chemical News for offering this platform to us for having this conversation. Over to you, Mr. Rahul, to close it out from your side. Once again, appreciate all of your time and all of your inputs. Great conversation, great discussion. Thank you once again.